As a public service, we will give you something to worry about you hadn't even been thinking about. And that is the possibility that of all the things that may be affecting gas prices out there, how about hurricane season? Hey! Let's talk to oil and gas expert Jay Young, who joined us tonight. Good evening, Jay.
Hey, Jimbo. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, thank you. How, pray tell, can hurricane season have an impact on gasoline prices? Most of us don't live anywhere near where hurricanes can strike.
Yeah, well, Jimbo, what we're going to look at is we're going to look at the supply side is going to go way down because, it knocks out every potential, air oil derrick out in the ocean. And when it does, we get like 2 million barrels a day from offshore in the ocean. Therefore, our supply is going to be down and our demand's coming back strong. So that means that we're going to have a need for oil. We're not going to have it. So prices can go to $4, $5. It can go up to $6 if just something like that happens. And that's what we should be afraid of. But hopefully we'll keep our fingers crossed and we won't have that problem.
All right. Now we're talking about offshore oil.
Yeah, for the hurricane season because it does shut down platforms.
Right. And I don't happen to know how dependent we are on offshore oil platforms. They're out there, but I wasn't aware that if they were all shut down, that it would have that much of an impact on our total oil supplies, which I guess puts my ignorance on full display. Please enlighten us.
Yes, sir. Well, about 15% of our oil comes from platforms, and that's a very important number. And the reason why it's important, and especially in today's world, because we need 20 million barrels a day from the United States. That's what our appetite is. George Bush said that's our addiction to oil. We need 20 million barrels a day, and we're only producing 12 and a half. Maybe it's going to 13 relative. It should be at 13 million this month. Well, that's 13 million. Well, if the other 7 million comes from Canada and Mexico, comes from our allies, people that we do like and they like us, and we do a lot of trade with them, and that's all good. But when you get down below 10 million barrels a day, and we have to go, look for this other 2 to 3 million barrels a day right now, we may have to go to some of the people that we don't really do a lot of trade with, and they'll take advantage of us, and the prices will go up. So we're looking at 15% or a couple of million barrels a day is what we need from the offshore platforms. And if that's shut down on a bad hurricane system, which it hasn't happened in a while, I'd have to go back in my calendar to see exactly when. But if it does happen, it's so sensitive. I mean, the price of oil is so sensitive to the supply. As you see, I mean, we went from minus, $40-something a barrel during the pandemic to 120, in a very, very short time. And that was all because of, our oil was shut off during the pandemic because the demand went bad. And when the demand's bad and, demand starts coming back and our supply's not there, our supply wasn't there. And so you saw prices just skyrocket. Like overnight, we're driving cars at $2 a gallon, and all of a sudden it went to $5 or $6, and in California went to $7 or $8 for a gallon, only because of the supply of oil in the United States. And that's what it happens. It's not good. We need a lot of oil drilling, and we talked about this before on your show, Jim. When we need the supply and we don't have it, and our demand's strong, we don't have that supply, oil prices can easily skyrocket.
Now, I hesitate to even ask, but remind us how long ago it was that we were energy independent and exporting oil.
Yeah, well, so we were at 14 million something barrels a day in the United States before the pandemic, when Donald Trump was out there and he was saying, drill, baby, drill, drill, baby, drill. I mean, we were not necessarily, we talked about this last time on your show, was about the refineries. Remember that? We were talking about refineries and all, and we haven't had a new refinery in 30, 40 years, and we're not going to get any time soon. So we were exporting oil because we were producing enough to keep our refineries full. And so we're not doing that now. We're not even up there to that point of our capacity of our refineries, which is 14 million barrels a day. So
yeah, but don't you feel warm and fuzzy with being so green and everything? Doesn't make you feel warm and fuzzy? It just makes me feel in peril.
I'll tell you what. Oh my gosh! On one hand, I'm like, oh my gosh, these people don't get it.
No, they don't.
These people don't get what we're going through. Yeah, our administration doesn't understand that. But then, on the other hand, our investors are making plenty of money right now with us drilling really good oil wells. So it's like oil and gas companies are making billions. Look at this. $50 billion last quarter by the top 5 or 6 companies. That's an absurd amount of money that these companies are making, and it's just driving these prices at the gasoline pump up. But the anomaly, what's not happening this time, which has happened before, is we have a policy problem, administration problem, and it's just the same thing that happened over in Europe with natural gas, which we can talk about next time or at your break or after your break or something. But what's going on now, the anomaly is before we were always back to drilling. Who said it? I don't know, Warren Buffett or some smart guy or 5 or 6 have tried to coin the term. The best thing we can do for high oil prices is high oil prices, because when oil prices go up, oil and gas companies just go to drilling like crazy because the economics are so great. They're so great. But this time, you're not seeing that going back to the market because of ESG, people on the board of Exxon saying, we're not going to increase our rig count, Devon Energy, Pioneer. All these companies are not putting that money back to work in the oil field. They're not increasing their rig count, which increasing the rig count could get us to that 14 or 15 million barrels a day. We're not going to see that anytime soon because administration, number one, federal, state governments, lack of capital. People aren't putting that money back to work. Public companies are not going back to drilling for oil and gas, which is what they need to be doing, but they're not because of people on their board saying, let's pay that money back to the shareholders. The first quarter, Exxon made $6 billion in a quarter. They $6 billion. They spent $10 billion buying back their stock. Instead of drilling new oil and gas wells, which is what they really do need to do, because that would help our supply.
Well, now, how do we get them to do that? I guess appealing to their better nature doesn't do any good. They're driven purely by the economics of it all. So, we need oil. We need it refined. What does it take to get the market going? And I'll put this quite bluntly, although I'm a great believer in the market. If the market doesn't respond to our needs, then we're going to have government intervention. I would rather not have that if the market would get off its dead butt and do something.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. Great question, Jim, because what happens is you're sitting there looking at this going, okay, hey, we have a supply problem. We don't have the supply that we should have at this rate because we're not drilling for oil and gas in the United States. It's a federal problem. It's a state problem. There's state governments that are out there putting people on hold. It takes us longer to get permits. I'm not talking about Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. I can get a permit tomorrow and drill a well. What I'm talking about is Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, California. Those states are holding us back from drilling. Stock companies, public companies are not coming back. The independents are going crazy, making money, and these public companies. I talked to somebody on the board of one of the largest oil and gas companies a couple of weeks ago, and I was just kind of asking them questions, and I said, hey, well, man, you guys aren't picking up your rig count because, I said, why? And he goes, man, our board just won't let us increase our rig count. And I said, man, but the profits have got to be outstanding for you guys to have some of the best acreage in the Permian Basin and not being able to drill. And he said, man, I hate it. I hate it. I love drilling for oil and gas. I want to be drilling for oil and gas, especially at these higher prices. We're not doing it because people on our board have just said because of ESG, because of electric vehicles, because of all the different reasons, I've said is they're just not allowing us to get back to drilling. And he said, I can't stand it. Matter of fact, Harold Hamm, who's one of the pioneers of fracking up in the Bakken, he's buying back or trying to buy back his 20% ownership he doesn't already own in Continental Resources because he said, man, I want to drill.
I have a question. California, I understand. California will stand in the way of any kind of progress in this regard. You mentioned Wyoming. What's Wyoming's problem?
Yeah, well, it's just slower to get a permit. It's not as slow as Colorado or California, but it's like a 2-month delay. Normally in the United States or in Texas, Oklahoma, it's not like it's like a 2-month delay. So, and that's a big delay for us as an oil and gas company because we generate the prospect, we look at it, look for it, say, okay, well, let's go drill these wells, and then all of a sudden it's put on hold, and it just takes longer to get a permit, maybe 2-3 months, where it doesn't take that long, 2-3 weeks. And I don't know what their actual problem is. One of the guys on their board just left, and I don't know why he left, but I can guess.
Well, all right. Briefly guess, and then we must pause, and we'll come back with some phone calls. Why? Take a guess.
I just think it's all because of ESG and
I don't. I'm sorry to be ignorant. ESG. That would be what?
Environmental social governance. So that's people that don't want oil and gas.
Those I understand.
Yeah.
Our guest is oil and gas industry expert Jay Young. We're looking about the impact of the hurricane season possibly on gas prices. And, of course, let's not forget those folks out there who believe that if you are inconvenienced to the point that your life is upended, well, that's a good thing, because then they can feel warm and fuzzy and pat themselves on the back about all that they've been doing to be very green. Andrew in Prospect Heights, Illinois. Good evening.
Jimbo, I was driving down the highway, and when your guest came on with the topic, I was so upset I had to pull over and call you. This is highway robbery, what these oil companies are doing to the American public. Being able to set their prices and have a little schoolyard playboy, this is my bat, my ball, and the game's going to be played the way I want it. This is outrageous what's going on here. And what I don't understand, your topic is, okay, we have hurricane season coming upon us. Why wouldn't some of these smart guys say, we need to pump a little bit more now, guys, in case we have to shut off so we'll have a good supply? Is anyone thinking logically here? These guys are just a bunch of idiots. They should all be brought to court. And the government should investigate.
We get the general idea, Andrew. Let's get our response from our guest. It does certainly seem logical to build up a bit of a reserve, but again, maybe Andrew and I are not thinking logically from an industry point of view.
Yeah, well, and I feel for the guest. I mean, and I know what people think when they say that oil and gas companies set the price of oil and gas, and we don't set the price of oil. It's just set for us. I mean, it's like any commodity. It's all about supply and demand, and it's like coffee, grain, anything that you have a commodity, it's the price. So what they do with those profits is different, and that's what is different this time than it is before, because they're not putting that money back to work. That's what and I don't understand that, but that's what they're doing, number one. Number two,
well, you don't understand it. Okay, go ahead.
I'm not saying that I have anything to do with offshore production, but yes, that's what we try to do, and we try to put it in our strategic reserves, or we try to put it anywhere we can to make sure that we do cover hurricane season. But just sometimes if it's shut off too long, like last year, there was one of the platforms that was shut off for like a week. We saw a little bump, 30, 40 cents of a gallon or a barrel that came in, and all of a sudden gas prices did go up a little bit. but it wasn't shut off for that long. So that's what we have, and we have capacity to produce that. But don't forget, I mean, every barrel of oil that we produce, we're trying to put on the market so we can keep prices down.
Let me ask you, before we take another,
a lot in reserve.
Before we take another call, how many offshore oil platforms do we have?
Oh, there's tons. I mean, hundreds, thousands.
Really?
There's a lot. There's
hundreds. There are hundreds of offshore oil platforms off the coast of the United States.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
Well, all right.
It's kind of like how many wells are drilled in Texas, and there's, I mean, this is kind of a, not thinking, but there's 2,000. We need 2,000 new wells drilled every year in the Permian Basin, just to keep the supply.
Right, but that, of course, is not offshore. Right. Okay, very good. Here's a call from Sharon in Crane, Missouri. Hello.
Hello, Jim. You know, I don't know when the people in this country are going to grow up and realize. I knew people when I lived in Texas who were in the oil business, guys who worked on rigs. And it is not, you don't just go and put a dang pipe in the ground and oil automatically comes up. For every well that comes in, you have maybe 10 or 20 that don't.
Uh-huh.
Now, I defy anybody to do a grocery business that way or any other kind of business to do that. Yes, oil is a boom or bust business, and that is one of the reasons why. Now, this current administration says, well, it's the oil company's fault because prices are high, okay, and they need to drill more. But then they say, well, they've got 9,000 permits or whatever the amount was, but then they wouldn't let them go and drill. They asked the oil companies to do this with one hand tied behind their back. And then they go in, and like the gentleman said, they try to stock oil in the strategic reserves. I am not saying that the oil companies are perfect, and I'm not saying that there's sometimes not shenanigans that's in the oil company business. But you'll find that in any business. But I'll tell you what, when it comes to the oil companies and it comes to people who are in love with their telephones, their computers, and all of the technology that we have now, and the minerals that are mined for that technology, you cannot have a totally green society. You can't do it. You're going to have trade-offs. And what you do is you grow up and decide which trade-offs are worth it and which aren't. That's all I got to say.
Thoughts, we appreciate your thoughts. Jay, your thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with her. I mean, I'm a fourth-generation guy. My great-grandfather, went through the bust, and my grandfather, all different types of bust, right? I mean, prices go up, prices go down. It's feast or famine in this business, and we're not counting the billions of dollars that the companies lost during the pandemic and shut down, and hundreds of companies closed their doors forever because they simply couldn't make payroll, couldn't make their G&A because prices were down way too much. So
forgive me, G&A. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just your general administration costs. So your overhead, if you will.
Oh, your overhead. Okay, got it. Now you're talking language the rest of us understand. Okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
very
sorry
good.
About that. So I was using terms. But anyway, so if you have oil and gas income of $100 million a year and your interest payments because you borrowed money to go drill wells, that takes a long time. It costs, tens of millions to drill one well in some places. But if you're doing this and you get the income, it takes 6 months, 8 months to do the whole cycle. And then if your revenues don't generate enough income, and if the prices go down from $100 million at $100 to $40 million, let's say at $40 a barrel, just in simple terms, and your expenses and your interest payments are more than that, then you're not making a profit. And that's
right.
that's what is the feast and famine that she was talking about, because,
All right.
It's a great business when things are going great, but also too, when things are going down, man, people run for the hills, and it's like, oh my goodness, can we weather this? And of course, my family has many times over, and it's a tough business.
It sounds like a tough business. Frank and Marion, Iowa. Good evening.
Jimbo and
Hi. Yes.
This to me is flat out communism.
Communism?
That's exactly what this is.
How?
Yes, exactly.
I guess I don't quite understand communism. Go ahead.
I don't know why. I don't know why you laugh at that. Why does the government?
It may be rampant capitalism, but I don't see how it's communism. But go ahead.
Why is the government allowed? I mean, Joe Biden's a horse's ass. Everybody knows.
Whatever. Okay, I would agree, but we're not talking about actions here by Joe Biden per se. I mean, again, I'm not quite sure what you're complaining about. We've been talking about actions by the oil companies. I guess I missed the communism part, but go ahead.
Okay, well, if it's not Joe Biden, who is it? I mean, Donald Trump had record numbers.
Well, I don't know that either man determines how much drilling takes place, but I'll ask the guest, to what extent does the government intervention or what have you affect what these oil companies do, Jay?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and I'll tell you, it is. It's when you have a president that's standing up and going, drill, baby, drill, and he's going to private equity companies, the ones that invested hundreds of billions of dollars in 2010 through 6, 7, 8, and he's all of a sudden telling everybody, "Hey, let's drill, let's become energy independent," and we are. Hey, here we are. Yes, we are. And
which is wonderful.
When you have a president like that, is one.
Yes.
Yeah. But if you have somebody else that has bad policies, look at Europe right now. We talked about Europe a minute ago. Look at Europe right now. A lot of bad policies over in Europe. They're paying $30 per MCF. And that's to heat their home, $30, and just a short time ago, it was. I'm sorry,
MCF.
Yeah, 1,000 cubic feet of gas, and I'm just using it as an example of a
per 1,000 cubic feet of natural gas. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep up with all the initials.
30,
okay.
So anyway, it's $30 in Europe. Why? Because nobody has any. The supply's down. They made bad policies 10 years ago.
They're dependent on the Russians. The Europeans are dependent on the Russians, are they not?
They are, exactly. But there's also policies that they made a long time ago internally in their countries that said, okay, hey, guess what? We need natural gas, and they quit doing it, or they made bad policies. If they were only dependent on Russia, I mean, that's terrible, right? I mean, they should have other means of production or supply rather than just Russia. So bad policies, whatever the case, I don't know the whole story, but we're the same thing in the United States right now with not drilling rolling gas and slowing people down and not going out. Biden should be up there on the platform talking about how great it is instead of saying, we're going to go electric.
But then he can't pat himself on the back for how green he is. He's sucking up to a tiny portion of the electorate, he thinks, and I don't really see how he's really doing that. I mean, people out there are desperate for fuel. In some cases, people. Not everybody considers their car to be an option. It's not like every town in America has subways and buses. Mass transit is a reality for a fraction of the American public. A lot of people need their vehicles to make money. All right, quick point before we take a quick break here, and that is, how serious has the problem of oil spills been from offshore oil platforms during hurricanes?
Not a huge challenge. It's not anything that we've lost a lot of supply over. We have lost some, but it's not enough to really make a big challenge. So
has it caused a major problem for
all.
coastlines about the spillage? I mean,
well, economically, or being clean, or whatever. Yes, there's been some challenges. They just had one off Huntington Beach, California, where they had a spill when some of the pipe went unscrewed or whatever. They had a hole in the pipe, and all of a sudden you have some spills there. So that's just one of those. There's how many pipelines in the United States, and how many, all of a sudden they don't happen very often. But
pipelines are the safest way to transport oil. I understand that. Pipelines and offshore oil rigs are two different things. There's Lee in Vidalia, Georgia.
Hey, just wanted to talk to you a minute there, Jimbo. Great show as always.
Thank you.
I started investing in oil back during the bottoming, I guess you could say, of the industry when they got into like a faucet was turned on, and both, I think, Saudi Arabia and Vladimir turned his on. The oil prices fell. The bottom dropped out, and they were giving the oil away, actually. But anyway, it's a great long-term investment. The country, it runs on it. It's the fuel of the world, and so much of the industry is used in so many ways that the automobile industry is about 25% of it. So, I mean, I can appreciate all the green, New Deal agenda as you label it so eloquently, but it's a false pipe dream. It's just not a reality.
Keep in mind that if we start burning a single drop of oil tomorrow, not a single drop, nothing for cars, nothing for trucks, nothing for planes, didn't burn a drop, we would still need hundreds of millions of barrels of oil for things like pharmaceuticals, plastics, and what have you. Jay Young?
Absolutely, 100%. That's a great thought, and I'm glad your caller called in and mentioned that. But that is, 25%, I'm not sure about 25%. I've heard 40, but hey, 25 to 40% of a barrel of oil is used for transportation. And other than that, we need oil for others. Look at the oil supply forecast for 2030. Just Google it. It still is going up. It's still going up, and that's what we've got to have in the United States. And the more that people fight this or regulations don't come in, we're going to need it, and we're not going to have it because of all the regulations or nuances or public companies or whatever the case may be. And when we don't have it, the price are going to go through the roof. They're talking about $130, $150 in the next few years, only because the supply and demand. That's what brings oil prices around.
Here's a call from Pat.
We need it.
Yeah, here's a call from Pat in northern Michigan. Hello, Pat.
Hi, Jimbo. Yeah, one of the first things old China Joe did was shut down the Trans-Canada pipeline, and the second thing he did was shut down drilling on federal lands with all these land leases that these guys had legal rights to prospect upon. Now, just about a month ago, the Supreme Court, I forget if it was in Louisiana or Mississippi, overturned that, and so the boys were able to go out prospecting on federal lands again, doing seismic testing and such to try to find the pockets.
Right.
But I'm just wondering how much that delay has cost us.
Okay, let's ask our guest about that, Jay.
That's great. Great question. And I do believe it has set things back. And the more you set things back, and the less wells you drill in the United States, that's the reason why price of oil is $80. It's going to go to $90, $100 pretty soon. That's only because we don't have the supply necessary. So I can't necessarily put an exact dollar amount on it, but it is a certain amount of money that is tacked on to a barrel of oil just because of supply and demand. We don't have it. We don't have the oil necessary. And if we don't have it, like drilling 2,000 wells a year in the Permian Basin alone, if we don't have that, our supply goes down. The same thing around the world or the United States when we're not drilling for oil in the United States. Good thought. Good question.
Mark in Salinas, California. Good evening.
Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Way back in January of 2020, No, 2021, I'm sorry. In January, I got on the radio and I said, you just watch Joe Biden. Gasoline's going to go through the roof, and he's going to make deals with China. And now, about 6 months later, gas had gone up 50%, and subsequently 100%, and subsequently 120%. And now it's down to about a 60% increase over what it was before Donald Trump left office. So no matter how much gas has gone down, Joe Biden has managed to up the price by 60% from what it was. It was $3.29 per super when Trump left office, and now it's $5.59 per super where I live in California. So per super. I'm not sure I know that term, Mark. So supreme gas. The only gas I use.
You mean premium gas?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Premium gas, I understand. Please continue.
So it's gone up more than $2 a gallon since Joe's took office. So here's what I suppose.
Right.
One thing about politicians at his level, it's the master of deceit.
Uh-huh.
So, the banks used to charge or used to give us interest for our savings. Now they pretty much don't. So we know that the bankers run the politicians. And that's kind of a glib overstatement. They have a disproportionate influence. But anyway, the complaint registered by Mark J. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. 100%. Matter of fact, on my LinkedIn, Jay Young at King Operating, I forwarded or reshared a post by Ted Cruz because he talked about the same exact thing that your listener was talking about. He said, first thing was, here Joe Biden goes in, shuts down a pipeline, the permits. I mean, it's just like, and every day you can look at my LinkedIn, and it's like every thing that he does, it's like it's going to hurt the price of gasoline. It's going to keep going up and up and up because of all the different things. Like
he has advisors, Jay. He has advisors who tell him this is a good thing. We're weaning the American public from gasoline. We're pushing them in the direction of electric cars. They don't bother to add that they can't afford. I mean, high gasoline prices are, by the people who talk to Joe Biden, high gasoline prices are in and of themselves a good thing. I mean, that's the kind of idiots we're dealing with here.
Yeah, John Kerry said the same thing.
Exactly.
If prices go high enough, everybody, and he's getting in his private jet and his limo, talking about this and going, and just wean them off of it. But who can afford $130,000 cash for a Tesla?
That is correct.
Those Teslas need tires, and those tires are going to cost $20,000 pretty soon.
That's right.
Because the price of oil is going to be so high.
Here is Diane in Geneva, New York. Good evening.
Yes, I have this solar watch. All I do is put it in the window. It recharges the battery, and it lasts forever.
Well, not forever, but a long time. Okay.
No, it lasts forever. All you do is get it
10,000 years from now, when we're all dead, it'll still be ticking away. Okay. Therefore, what in the context of our conversation?
Well, I don't see the argument between oil. Certainly we need oil right now.
We'll need oil for the foreseeable future, for generations to come.
No, I don't think so, only for oiling up the mechanisms.
No, as we mentioned a moment ago, what about plastics? What about pharmaceuticals? But I guess you weren't listening at that time. Anyway, as we noted, if you didn't burn a drop of oil, we would still need oil. But anyway, you have a solar-powered wristwatch. Good for you. Are you suggesting that we all drive in solar-powered cars? I'm not sure what point we're getting at here.
That's what I'm suggesting. Now,
okay, let's let our guest respond to that. Can we put solar panels on all our cars and drive around, Jay?
I don't think so. I don't see solar panels on cars. I do see electric cars, but it's not going to be anytime soon before we can add or take away gasoline cars and from electric cars. I mean, you do see one or two at a time in Texas you see 7 or 8, and when you're driving around in California, I'm not sure about New York. It's coming, but it's going to take a long time. But as you mentioned, the 25 to 40% of a barrel of oil is for automobiles, jet airplanes, for trucks to transport food to everybody. And if that's taken off the market 100%, we still need oil in the United States. We still need to be drilling for oil in the United States. And as our population increases, we're going to need more oil in the United States. And, hey, if we're not going to – everything's going to be more expensive if we don't drill for oil and gas in the United States.
Exactly. We must pause briefly and stay on the line. We'll speak off air. Oil industry expert Jay Young. And we'll continue with more. I'm Jim Bohannon, and we do come to you weeknights here at Westwood One.